Way! Good afternoon, John.
Good afternoon, Ben.
How are you this
What
afternoon?
brings us in at this very early afternoon hour?
Well, we're about to watch Prime Minister's questions. I'm going to share the screen with you now. I'm going to see if this works, right? So we should be seeing it. It's already begun. I will share the audio with you now, John.
Oh, right.
Share
Very
computer sounds. Right, I've got to get us in screen. There we are. So, can you hear it?
And communities. Would the Prime Minister agree with me that if you carry a knife in Milton Keynes, you should expect to end up behind bars?
I don't think
Yes, I thank my honourable friend for what he's doing to campaign for tougher sentences in Milton Keynes, campaign against
Good
knife
afternoon,
crime.
Militant
and
Mushroom.
as a result of the of what the Conservatives have done, adults who are convicted of
no
certain offences involving a knife, including
whatsoever,
threatening
has
with a
he?
knife
Just-
or a
yeah,
second offence.
I mean, look, he's already got
Nadim
Nadeem right next to him, John.
Yeah, that guy's just a creep.
Yeah. He's talking about tougher sentences for knife crime at the moment, not the fact that the rats are going down with the ship. 16 resignations at this point.
So somebody needs to ask him a sense.
Oh, it's Keith! How does Keith?
And I know the whole House will wish
Turn
the
him up.
Lionesses the very best of luck in bringing football home.
What?
Mr. Speaker,
Women's football. John, women's football. Hold on. Oh, here we go.
Mr. Speaker,
Turn it up.
Yeah, I've got it down
Can't
so that
hear
they
him.
can...
it's also been 40 years since the death of Terence Higgins. Terence worked at Hansard by day and Heaven by night before he sadly died of AIDS. The Labour Party and the Terence Higgins Trust are committed to ending new cases of HIV by 2030. Together,
How are we going
can.
to end cases of HIV?
You
Mr.
can't.
Speaker, last week, a government minister was accused of sexually assaulting
Uh-oh.
a young man.
It's Pincher.
I want to
Pincher
quote
by
the
name,
victim's
Pincher
account.
by nature.
He says, he grabbed my arse and then he
Oh, he
slowly
said-
moved his hand
Keith said
down
arse
in
my
Parliament?
groin.
This is getting quite
I
sick.
froze.
Sure.
It's getting spicy.
I accept that's not easy listening, but it's a reminder to all those propping up this Prime Minister
Angela's
just
face.
how serious the situation is. He knew the accused minister
thinking.
had previously committed predatory behaviour, but
Yeah,
he promoted
that's
him
true.
to a position of power anyway.
That's true.
Why?
Oh, here we go, here we go.
Mr. Speaker, that individual, the honourable member for Tamworth, no longer has the Conservative whip. He no longer has a job. He is no longer, as soon as I was made aware of the
I will in a
allegation
sec.
that he has just read out, Mr. Speaker, and the complaint that was made, he lost his status as a Conservative MP.
Hold on, I'm going to mute myself.
The subject, Mr. Speaker, of an independent investigation to the complaints and grievances panel. And that is entirely right. And I want to say to him, Mr. Speaker, I want to say to him that I abhor bullying and abuse of power anywhere in Parliament, in this party or in any other party.
None of that explains why he promoted him in the first place.
That's the
And we've
question.
heard it all before. We know who he really is. Before he was found out, he's reported to have said he's handsy. That's the problem. Pincher by name, Pincher by nature.
Oh, he said the line.
Now, has the Prime Minister ever said words to that effect? And I'm not
He said
asking
the
for
line.
bluster and half-truths. We've all had enough of that. Yes or no?
Prime Minister.
He said,
Mr.
picture
Speaker, I'm not
by
going to
name, picture by
trivialise
nature.
what happened. Yes, Mr. Speaker. Yes, Mr. Speaker. And I'm not, because there's very serious complaints have been raised against the member for Tamworth, and they're now being investigated, Mr. Speaker. It is true. It is true that a complaint was raised when he was in the Foreign Office, and the matter was resolved. It's absolutely true. It's absolutely true, Mr. Speaker, that it was raised with me. I greatly regret that he continued in office, and I
So you knew, but you promoted him anyway.
Of course he
Mr.
knew.
Speaker,
That was
I have
the
said
question.
that
Why did you
before, Mr.
promote
Speaker,
him
but
when
it is now the subject of an independent investigation, and that
Oh, yeah.
is the right thing, Mr. Speaker.
Well,
Frankly,
16
I
of
think
your
the people of this country
Conservative
would
ministers
like
and
also to
ministers
hear-
and aides have
they would like
resigned.
also to hear about about
Standing room
other
only,
jobs
what's
that
the
are held
things
by
to do?
people in this country, not least the 500,000 people we got off welfare into work in the last 6 months alone, Mr. Speaker. Those are things that are making
Define
differences to the lives of
into
people
work.
up and down the country, and I'm proud of it.
Keir Starmer.
No one's cheering that.
No denial.
No one's cheering
And he
that.
says the matter was resolved when he means it was upheld. Exactly. And they're all sitting there as if this is normal behaviour. Exactly. When that young man reported his attack to a government whip, she asked him if he was gay.
Right.
When he said that he was, she replied, "That doesn't make it straightforward." That comment will sicken anyone who's experienced sexual assault and then be made to feel like they somehow asked for it, or who worry that prejudice means their complaint won't be taken seriously. Will he apologise for those disgraceful comments on behalf of his government?
I've got to turn him down so we can hear you.
I said Angela's sitting in the background going, oh, I'd love him to grab my arse and slide his hand into my groin.
I'm going to turn him up again, John.
In the Foreign Office, and it was resolved in the Foreign Office. His apology was accepted, but clearly that was not enough. And in hindsight, Mr. Speaker, I should have realised that he would not change. However, when it came to the Friday of last week, and when I was given the information that he's read out about the complaint that was made against the honourable member, I acted immediately, Mr. Speaker, and I took the whip away from him. And we will not tolerate.
I mean, it sounds like Pincher is quite fond of a whip.
In this or any other party, Mr. Speaker. And what we also want to do is to help people up and down the country with the things that also matter
Johnson,
to them, like cutting
it's
their
over.
taxes, Mr. Speaker, by £330.
It's over.
This is what we're doing.
Have you noticed, John? Have you noticed the real panic in his demeanour?
Yeah, he has a bit.
It's there for all to see.
When you're turning them up, you've got to turn them right up.
It was the same when his ally was on the take from the lobbyists. It was the same when his Home Secretary was bullying staff. It was the same when taxpayers' money was being abused. And it was the same when he and his mates parted their way through lockdown.
You know, it was the same when they initiated lockdown.
Defending all that hasn't got a shred of integrity. Mr. Speaker, isn't this the first recorded case of the sinking ships fleeing the rat?
He talks about. You should hear what his lot say about him, Mr. Speaker. He talks about
Have you cleared those pronouns with Keith?
He wanted to install the member for Islington North into number 10, Mr. Speaker. That's what he wanted to do. Imagine what our country and what the world would be like.
They're talking about Jeremy Corbyn here, John.
He voted 48 times to overturn the will of the British people and take us back into the European Union. And by the way, listening to his muddled speech the other day, that is exactly what he would do again. Mr. Speaker, he talks about integrity, but Mr. Speaker, he has voted time and time again against sanctions on criminals.
This is deflection, panic, deflection, panic.
I'm sorry, he talks about integrity. He is himself facing a criminal investigation, Mr. Speaker, which he asked me to resign.
That's true.
Keir Starmer.
What a pathetic spectacle. Exactly. The dying act of his political career is to parrot that nonsense. Yep. And as for those who are left, only in office because no one else is prepared to debase themselves any longer, the charge of the lightweight brigade. Have some self-respect.
How the hell is Keith Starmer, of all people, getting one over on Boris Johnson? It's happening.
Sexual predator. Every day, the lines.
He's got Ant and Dick's joke writer writing these jokes.
It seems like
He
it.
was unaware of any allegation. Untrue.
Done it all the way up.
Then he was unaware of any specific allegation. Untrue. Then he was unaware of any serious specific allegation. And now he wants them to go out and say that he simply forgot that his whip was a sexual predator. Anyone
An alleged
with
sexual
anything
predator.
about them would be long gone from his front bench. In the
it's
middle
alleged. I think he's
of
done
a
it before and
crisis,
he's
doesn't the
caught.
country deserve
It's
better
not alleged.
than a Z-list
Yeah, that's true.
cast of nodding dogs?
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker,
Deflection, deflection, panic, deflection, incoming.
When times are
Panic,
tough, and when the
deflection.
country faces pressures on the economy and pressures on their budget, Mr.
you
Speaker, and when we had the
caused.
biggest war in Europe for 80 years, Mr. Speaker,
That you are having-
that is
but
exactly
you are
the
putting
moment
us in.
that you'd expect a government to continue with its work, not to walk away, Mr. Speaker, and to get on with our job and to focus on the things that matter to the people of this country. And so we're not only cutting taxes today, Mr.
I think
Speaker,
what matters to the
we're putting
people of this country,
£1,200
realistically,
into every one of the
is getting rid of all 650 of them and starting fresh.
strength of our economy, and thanks to the
And when you
decisions
do
that
start
we
fresh,
took,
you got to start
Mr.
with a
Speaker,
different
which he-
system, because this patently does not work.
No, it doesn't.
He's delivering is chaos. I started this session with a quote.
And do you
from the
think
young
you would
victim
deliver? Do you think he would deliver any less chaos?
when he was attacked?
There's no point in
Prosecuting
comparing them
rapists.
because
I
they're
heard
all
that from
bad.
victims all
Yeah.
the time.
They're all bad.
Victims said they froze.
Every last one of them.
Because it's not about sex, it's about power. And the power the disgraced government minister had was handed to him by that Prime Minister. And he's only in power because he's been propped up for months by a corrupted party defending
I
the
agree, Militant
indefensible.
Mushroom. Boot a lot of them.
So it's no longer a case about swapping the person at the top. Isn't it clear? The only way the country can get the fresh start it deserves is by getting rid of the lot of them.
The lot of you, Keith. All of you. You
Boris
included.
not asking. Boris could ask him
Mr.
about
Speaker.
Beergate.
What's that?
Boris could ask him about Beergate.
Yeah, well, he did. He said facing a criminal investigation himself.
Mr. Speaker, the difference between this government and that opposition is we have a plan and they do not. We're getting on with it. They want to focus on this type of issue, Mr. Speaker. We're going to get on with our jobs. We're going to control prices, Mr. Speaker, by not giving in to the union barons. They're paid by the union barons, and they're proud of it. We were the first European country to arm the Ukrainians, Mr. Speaker. I'm proud
Why
of that.
were we the
And
first
those
European
guys, Mr.
country
Speaker,
to arm the Ukrainians, John?
I don't know, because we're the first one to actually actively seek war.
Well, exactly. That seems to be like what we're doing. Boris Johnson is seeking war, and I think it's all to do with the economy.
He's a warmonger, yeah?
Yeah.
To get rid of our independent nuclear deterrent, Mr. Speaker. Today we are cutting taxes, we're helping 500,000 people into work, and thanks to the strength of our economy, we're helping people up and down
Once again,
the country.
Define into work.
To deliver
He's not
on the
cutting
mandate
taxes.
I was
No.
given.
They're cutting national insurance,
Yep.
which is no use to people that don't fucking pay national insurance because they don't have jobs anymore.
Well, exactly.
The Northern Ireland Legacy Bill reached its third reading. And so
Right.
with it, the beginning of the end of the journey, a long journey to make sure the service
It's
and
Johnny
sacrifice
Mercer,
of those who
everybody.
served in
Johnny
Iraq,
Mercer.
Afghanistan,
Oh,
and now
he's
Northern
Johnny
Ireland
Mercer.
is not rewritten by those who seek only to line their own pockets. But would the Prime Minister agree with me that never again can we allow such a gulf to open up between this
Okay.
place and those who...
I'm going to tell you a little story about Johnny Mercer. So a few months ago now, there was an anti-war protest on Parliament Square, and a Freedom March, and I was covering it. Right, I was covering the Freedom March side of things, and I also covered the anti-war protest because they converged on the same place, and it was on a weekday. And Johnny Mercer went down there to get his photo opportunity with the veterans and the anti-war and all of that. And he was asked very politely to just listen to what the freedom marchers, freedom protesters were saying. And he basically told them to get fucked and walked off.
Nice.
Because he wasn't there because he cared about the
Come on,
cause.
Blackford's on. Let's hear Blackford.
Better than seeing your teams in these finals.
Up,
Can we
all
also
the way up.
commemorate the passing 40 years ago of Terence Higgins and all those that have died from AIDS and Sen? And I'm sure, Mr. Speaker, the whole House will want to join with me in passing condolences to the family and friends of the Scottish football goalkeeping legend Andy Gorham, who sadly passed far too early last weekend. He will long live in the memory of the best goalkeeper that many of us have seen. Mr. Speaker, it's easy to forget that only 10 days ago, the Prime Minister was dreaming of a third term. Mr. Speaker, you know, it's often said that a week is a long time in politics, but it turns out that 10 days is truly a lifetime. Because, let's face it, it's a minor miracle that the Prime Minister has even made it through to Prime Minister's questions, and he really ought to see the faces behind him, because Prime Minister,
the minor miracle
really is over.
It's a minor miracle Blackford hasn't, in this heat, just turned into a jacket spud.
But the public can't afford to put up with this farce of a government
all the way
a
up.
minute longer.
It is all the way up.
Today, we should be talking about the Tory cost of living crisis, soaring inflation and the growing costs of Brexit. But instead, it's always about him. How many more ministers need to quit before he finally picks up his pen and writes his own resignation letter? Perhaps that's what he's doing now. 16
down, John, 16 down.
Actually, Mr. Speaker, I was just jotting down some notes on his question, which I thought was excellent when he was talking about the economy, because that is the issue that is the country faces, and that is where this government is introducing, I think, the most important.
The government faces a problem with the economy, John, because they artificially created that problem with the economy by closing the economy.
Yeah, so that whole crap from Blackford there was just so he could be seen to be saying something.
Yeah, absolutely.
He's like a bit part. He's like a bit part actor, isn't he?
Yeah, they're all ineffectual, not just the SNP, but
I know.
He's back.
I think to see we should all move on if we live in the world.
It's back, John. It's Blackford.
You know, a few weeks ago, I compared the Prime Minister to Monty Python's Black Knight. Actually, turns out I was wrong. He's actually the dead parrot. Whether he knows
Who's
it or not,
writing there?
he's now the
Fucking
next
Joe.
Prime Minister. But he will leave behind two deeply damaging legacies. I hope the dishonesty of his leadership follows him out of the Downing Street door. But the other legacy is that of Brexit. And that will stay. Because I'm sad to say that the Labour Party now fully supports Brexit. Mr. Speaker.
Well, too right. The country voted for it.
Sure, not just a different Prime Minister. So if the Prime Minister won't resign, will he call a general election and allow Scotland the choice of an independent future?
Freedom!
Hold on, how does a general election give Scotland a choice?
I don't know.
Remark that the Labour Party have given up on returning to the European Union was not greeted with rapture by the benches opposite, and that's because it's not true. They want to go back in just as he does. I think that's
Jesse says in the chat, John, say freedom.
Be anti-democratic, Mr. Speaker. And as for the referendum,
he's been on something this morning.
As I've told him before,
he's hyperactive. More so than you on sugar.
Do you think he's been on the marching powder, John?
I think he might have been.
Or do you think it is just
Mr. Grove, who's been suspiciously quiet?
Or do you think it is just pure adrenaline / panic?
Clearly, if there were circumstances in which I felt it was impossible for the government to go on and discharge the mandate.
I mean, I will say this, the man has some brass balls to even be sitting in that chamber right now.
In our desire to support the Ukrainian people or over some major point, then I would. But frankly, Mr. Speaker, the job of a Prime Minister in difficult circumstances when he's been handed a colossal mandate is to keep going, and that's what I'm going to do.
You weren't handed a colossal mandate, you were handed a mandate to do something completely different, and then you screwed the pooch.
Once again,
he has got a good, he's got a good majority.
He's
got a good majority, but that majority was elected on something completely different to what they're doing now.
Yeah, I know. Who's this?
The same Westminster arrogance will continue to dictate
an SJW, John.
Our futures in Wales. Does he want a medal for being the best recruiting sergeant for independence we could wish for?
Now she wants an independent Wales.
Actually, Mr. Speaker, everywhere I look around the United Kingdom, I had a great talk with Mark Drakeford the other day, as well as talking to Nicola Sturgeon. I see the bonds of our union being strengthened the whole time. And,
from Nicola Sturgeon.
Fucking.
They will continue to do so.
Link Drummond!
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The government's town centre and levelling up funds have been very successful around the country, but there are a few town centres, like Waterlooville in Nearn Valley, that are in desperate straits and haven't managed to get any funding.
Where's the money going to come from,
Have you
Flick
seen
Drummond?
Paisley Town Centre?
Surely that future funds will be available.
Where's the money going to come from?
Become fit for the 21st century.
They keep creating money to send to Ukraine.
I thank my honourable friend, and she's a great champion for Meon Valley, and I will make sure that she gets a meeting with the Minister for Levelling Up at the earliest opportunity.
Oh, the Minister for Levelling Up at the... I can't believe there is actually a Minister for Levelling Up, John.
Is that not golf?
Thank you,
Yeah, I think so.
Speaker. The public clearly thinks that this government has lost
It is
the plot
golf.
over the cost of living crisis. The Prime Minister
In
may
the
be
fetal
aware that
position,
the average
in the
salary
corner of a
for
room somewhere.
nurse is £36,000.
Very
For a primary
quiet.
teacher,
What's he up
it
to?
is £38,000. They, and indeed working people everywhere, are struggling to pay their rents and their mortgages. Given they can barely afford a £150,000 mortgage on a new home, can he tell this House how he could afford a £150,000 treehouse?
What I can tell him, Mr. Speaker, is that up and down the country, rather than talking about fantasy infrastructure, I can talk about real infrastructure. We are helping to unite and level up the people of this country with £650 billion of investment, helping people, helping to lift the aspirations and opportunities of people up and down the country. And it's thanks to the strength of our economy, we're helping exactly the people he describes with £1,200 going into their bank accounts to help them with the cost of living pressures.
Under the House, St Peter Bottomley. The Prime Minister knows that while he's Prime Minister, I want him to do all the good he can. While he's Prime Minister's Green and Present Land, can I refer him to EDM 1082 about the Goring Gap, the Chatsmore Farm, or to the Department of Levelling Up, the land above Goring Station, the farm in Worthing, which was fully protected and will be fully protected when another inspector says that Worthing Council protecting it will happen. Can I ask him to tell the government to withdraw their objection to Worthing Council's appeal against the absurd decision by a planning inspector to allow 482 homes to go on this green lung between Goring and Ferry?
Well, if we need the homes, just build the bloody homes. I'm sorry.
I thank the Right Honourable John very much. And,
How can we need all these houses? This is what I don't understand.
Well, we do keep having an influx of new citizens, John.
Well, my coffee's here, so I'm going to get it.
the development in Goring by sea.
Ian Lavery.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On the 21st of January, the government committed £100 million from the Automotive Transformation Fund to British Rail to...
I'm bringing this down because despite the fact that, and once again I'm going to refer to the whiteboard, just before Prime Minister's questions had started, 16 ministers and aides had resigned. We've got Sajid Javid, Health Secretary, Rishi Sunak, Chancellor, Laura Trott, Aid to Transport, Will Quint, Children's Minister, Robin Walker, School Standards Minister, Alex Chalk, Solicitor General for England and Wales, Bim Afalami, Vice Chair of the Conservatives, Jonathan Gullis, Aid to the Northern Ireland Secretary, Sakib Bhatti, Aid to the Health Minister, Nicola Richards, Aid to Transport, Virginia Crosby, Aid Wales Office, Andrew Morrison, Trade Envoy to Morocco, Theo Clark, Trade Envoy to Kenya, John Glenn, Economic Secretary Treasury, Felicity Buchan or Buchan, Secretary for Business, and Victoria Atkins from the Home Office. I don't know if at this point any more have resigned, but these are the resignations since last night. And since this has all happened, he's getting a bit of a softball time here in the Commons, isn't he? It's very odd.
Hang on in there, Mr. Speaker. That's what I'm going to do.
Yeah, he's not going to go quietly, is he? Hang on in there. That's what I'm going to do.
The world is facing a global food crisis in which the poorest nations face catastrophic consequences.
Yeah, I'll tell you why that is, because we locked down Western economies for 2 years, stopping production in those countries, probably causing mass death in the third world. That's what happened.
Famine in developing nations, and the UK must play its full part using all the resources.
Did you think Western lockdowns only had consequences on Western nations? When you shut down an economy, and people like to say that an economy is money. It's not. An economy is people. An economy is cogs in a machine. It's a well-oiled machine. When you shut the pub, you affect right back to the fields where the barley is grown.
The commercial ships
right?
that might be involved, and also 10 million to help.
So what we've done by closing Western economies is we destroyed the supply chain all the way back to the third world. And what happens when they can't supply? They go hungry, and they're already going hungry, and they die.
Well, when you stop buying jeans that are made in a factory in India, the guy stops making them.
Yeah.
He doesn't. His people don't go on furlough.
Yeah.
He just goes, no work to do.
No
pay.
I thank him very much.
No pay.
Look, I want to
No
be clear. What I want to say is,
bye-bye.
I say it again.
Like I say, what do you think happens?
I regret the way the appointment happened, and I was clear with
all of these problems.
What I knew at the time.
All of these problems.
Stress that I take this matter
all come from the lockdowns. It's cost of living crisis.
I'm very sorry for
the massive economic situations in the third world.
This whole Prime Minister's question
is now subject to.
It's softball. They're softballing him completely.
Yeah, but
as soon as that,
purpose to it.
It's theatre, John.
It's made, I should say, Mr. Speaker.
And that's why there are multiple cameras in there. It's bread and circuses, it's theatre for the masses, it's to look like they're holding the quote-unquote leader to account. Nobody's holding him to account. Do you really think he walks out of there and cares about any of it?
Just over a fortnight ago, 2 horrific fatal stabbings took place in a quiet street in East Barnet. With the Metropolitan Police now in special measures for the first time in its history, will the Prime Minister urge the Mayor of
and
London
yet,
to
Cressida
start
Dick, I believe. Well, I don't know. Sadiq Khan is supposed to be in charge of the Metropolitan Police, and I think his mandate needs to be released, quite frankly.
And he needs to abandon his plans to sell violent police.
Is she going for a part in the next
Speaker,
Amazing Beasts of Dumbledore or something?
I don't know. The sun will come out tomorrow.
Voted against stop and search, Mr. Speaker. They voted against increased funding for the police. And I think, as for the Labour mayor, he'd do better to get out of California and take control of crime in his city.
Turn them all the way up.
And this will alter.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. According to the NHS Confederation, not a single one of the so-called 40 new hospitals the Prime Minister promised at the last election will be built by 2024.
Do you remember them new hospitals, John?
Hospitals are in my constituency. Hammersmith opened in 1902 and Charing Cross opened in 1818. They're not new hospitals, and there's no building going on. Like all his promises, they exist only in his warped imagination, as this is likely to be his last Prime Minister's questions. Will he finally tell us the truth?
Yeah, I want to know that. Where are the hospitals?
Mr. Speaker, if you look at what we promised and what we delivered, we said we'd get 20,000 police out on the streets. We've actually got 13,500 more already. We said we'd do 50,000 more nurses. We're already on track. And he's quite wrong about the pledge on hospitals. We're going to deliver them by 2030, Mr. Speaker. That was always clear. And the only reason we can do that is because we're putting the funding into our NHS, which he and his party opposed.
Where?
Mr. Speaker, yesterday, in an attempt to boost morale in the tea room, the Prime Minister said at a table, but there were 7 people, MPs in the Carlton Club last week, and one of them should have tried to intervene to stop Chris from drinking so much. As if that wasn't insulting enough to the people who did try and intervene that night, and then also to the victims that drink was the problem.
I don't know, but they are.
Mr. Speaker,
it's the
Prime Minister
I've
no idea.
His
material shit.
On the issue.
Yep.
Always
He
tries
needs to
to
get a
blame
new script
other people for mistakes, and that at least nothing left for him to do other than to take responsibility and resign.
Thanks for that, Dolly. That really was. Where was his question?
This is not a debate. Mr. Esterson, it's not debating society. This is...
No, leave it.
This is Prime Minister's questions. I want to get through the questions. There's other people want to catch my eye. And the way to do it is not by clapping.
Where was the question?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There's a very simple reason why they want me out, and that is because they know, Mr. Speaker, that otherwise we are going to get on.
Boris, you are going.
And win another general election, and that is the reality, Mr. Speaker.
Neera Wilson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister once wrote, "It is a wonderful and necessary fact of political biology that we never know when our time is up. Long after it is obvious to everyone that we are goners, we continue to believe our duty is to hang on to the perks and privileges of our posts. In reality, we are just terrified of the come down." Yep. So for the sake of this great country, will the Prime Minister heed the advice of his former self, get over his terror and do the decent thing?
Mr. Speaker, with great respect, I refer the honourable lady to the answer.
The question is just resign, resign.
Of course, people turn their fire on the leader of the country, but it is my job to get on and deliver our manifesto, which we are, and to deliver on the mandate on which I was elected, and to get this country.
I think that they all need to step out of the way, all 650 of them, every last one of them. They're an embarrassment.
Around 1,000, I apologise, around 1,000 delegates from 100 countries are at the Freedom of Religion Belief International Ministerial Conference over at the QE2 Centre today. There is still time for honourable members to visit. But will the Prime Minister agree with me that this significant conference will count for nothing?
I'm done.
Yeah.
I'm done. No, I'm done altogether. Right, it's just going to be the same pish over and over again, John. Yeah, resign. Well, as we said, and whilst John was getting his coffee, I did read off the list of 16 people who had resigned at this point. There may be more. There may be more by the end of the day. But Jesse says in the chat, how many more will resign by the end of the day? You know what Keith has said, Shalini.
I was expecting a landslide, and I think this morning when Ben and I started looking at it, we thought, oh, there's only like 3 or 4, but when we actually wrote it down and went through it, there's 16. So 16. We're starting to get there. Yeah, I think this is definitely a power bid, and it's, the whole thing's going to be a fucking mess. It's a shit show because the Tories aren't going to give up power. No. They just want to get rid of Johnston and hang in there.
Yeah, of course, and I'm not sure if they would go for a general election. Obviously, it's their choice to use the fixed term or dissolve the fixed term parliament using the Fixed Term Parliament Act, because maybe they'll think we need the country to have confidence in us, but I'm not sure they'll go for it because the Fixed Term Parliament Act does exist, which means a 5-year fixed term parliament, and it's a vote in the Commons to dissolve it, and I'm not sure that the Tories will trigger that vote.
Did they go for a general election after they got rid of Maggie?
No, but they did with Theresa May. So they got rid of Theresa May and then they installed Boris.
But the thing is, when they got rid of Theresa May, what were their chances of winning?
That's a very good question. It was okay.
And it was borderline. It was 50-50. Right?
Do you remember when Theresa herself went for a snap election and lost her majority?
Yeah.
So
that worked well, didn't it?
But that's also a cautionary tale to the party, right? The party must be looking at it and going, well, let's take stock of this. Even if we do get rid of Johnson, the country have no faith in us. They have no faith in us, because also they're going to look at why it's taken so damn long for the party, because there was a vote of no confidence a month ago. Right? Or a couple of months ago.
They could have done it if they wanted to do it. They should have done it then.
And they could have triggered that vote of no confidence at any point over the last 2.5 years. Any point. But they didn't. They didn't trigger that vote of no confidence. The letters started going in at one point, and then that just sort of fizzled out. And now we're seeing... So I'll talk more about the 1922 and what their alleged plans are tonight when we do our show.
Yeah, I think we're pretty much done here.
I think we are pretty much gone on.
What I would like to say, though, is if you're interested in hearing Rishi Sunak's real resignation letter,
then
that'll be up shortly.
It will. Unfortunately, I must now bounce and go and do something with my wife. So we will be back here. If you are watching live, we will be back here at 8 p.m. tonight for episode 101.
101.
Of Chasing Dissent Live. Bye-bye.
That's all we've got time for this evening, so it's good night from me. And it's good night from him. Good night. Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, Mama. Good night, Daddy.
Stop playing with my bust!
Good night, everybody.
Good night, children. Good night, Daddy.
You're a what?
A pianist!
Mwah! Good night, everybody.
You have been a delightful audience to talk. Good night. Thank you.
Oh, my bottom hurts. Good night, everybody.
Good night, Elizabeth.
Good night, John Boy. Good night, Jim Bob.
Oh, I did love that hamster so. I took it into bed with me every night, you know.
Good night, everybody.
I think, ladies and gentlemen, I think I have to go now. I've been standing here for a very long time. I think the end of the show must have come and gone.
There you go. That's our solar system. You forgot Uranus. Good night, everybody.
Thank you for listening. You've been very nice to work.
Good night, Jim Bob.
Good night, Jim Bob.